Hi and welcome to this big picture tutorial. Today we'll have a closer look at how to manage the scope of your work, or in other words, how to define the range of tasks that you want to work with using BigPicture. In BigPicture, we use the concept of boxes, which are containers for your work. You can define the scope of your works in the box configuration. So we can use the right-click menu and go directly to the configuration page of your box. I will use the Save Art as an example. Under the Task tab, there is the Scope Definition page where you will see two sections. The first one allows you to define the range of tasks that you want to work with. There are three options here. You can either pick from the list of existing projects. You can also pick from the list of previously saved JQL filters or your queries that you saved, and also you can pick from the list of previously created boards. Boards also use a filter to define the range of tasks displayed on that board, so we can say that all the three options are actually variations of the JQL queries. Now you don't have to populate all these boxes here because there's an OR operator between boards, filters and project, which means that adding items here will increase the number of issues in the scope of the current box. If you want to narrow this scope, you can use this additional JQL box to, for example, narrow to a particular issue type. That means that there is an AND gate here between the narrow down and the three items mentioned earlier. There's another section here which allows you to define the scope of the sub boxes, in my case the program increments and iterations. These sub boxes will display a subset of the scope defined in this section. What you see here on this page depends on two things. First of all, the hierarchy of your boxes. So as you can see, I've defined the sub boxes, the program increments and iterations. That's why they are displayed here. If, for example, there were no program increments, no sub boxes, you would not see this section. The second thing that determines what you will see on this page is the scope type. The scope type can be defined in the BigPicture's administration, which requires BigPicture admin security role, while access to this page, the box configuration, requires the box admin security role. Let's have a look at the scope types. On the administration page, you will see the list of available box types. So let's have a closer look at the Save Art, and if we go to the Task section and Scope Definition, you will see the already mentioned three scope types. Depending on what you select here, the Scope Definition page might look a bit differently. So if you remember, for the Save Art, I could define the range of tasks, and that means that the scope type is set to on. For the sub boxes, which were the program increments and iterations, the scope type is set to subscope. And also, if you go to the box configuration of the iteration or the program increment box, on the scope definition page, you will see only one of the sections. There's one more thing, which is the non. This one is used to aggregate data only, which means that there will be no scope defined for this particular box, since it shows you only the work items from sub boxes. In this case, not all of the modules are capable of displaying their content, their tasks. In case of the Gantt and scope module, you will see a blank page, while the roadmap and the board module will show you data from the sub boxes, even if the if the scope type is set to none. And as you can see, my sub boxes, which are the program increments, which I'm currently viewing, are configured to sync with a dedicated field. This is a program increment field, which is a text field, and it was added during the installation of the app. I'm using it to actually assign items to a particular PI, while my iterations are synced using a sprint field. These are the options here, so it's either a sprint field, a text field, or a select list single choice field for which you need to predefine the select options. BigPicture can also remember the settings that you've already configured and apply them whenever you create a new time box, such as iteration 1.4. Whenever this toggle button is enabled, this configuration will be applied to the newly created box iteration 1.4. Okay, so let's go back to the save art. And to sum up, what you see on this page will depend on the hierarchy of your boxes as well as the scope type set for a particular box type. One last thing to remember, whenever you synchronize your data or you define the scope, is what happens during the synchronization. Let's have a look at the Jira administration or the technical configuration of BigPicture. Go to the Manage Apps. This requires Jira admin permissions, technical configuration, and tasks. Here you will see that the synchronization settings of your projects. Okay, this applies to different BigPicture projects, so I can have different settings for each of my projects. What is important, however, is what happens when there are no values for the synchronized fields. So right now I'm using start date, end date. Of course, you might be using different fields such as the due date or, for example, original estimate. What is important is that if my task does not have the start date estimate nor the original estimate during the synchronization process, these values will be populated by the app. And in most cases, we will use the creation date, which is always available, and the task will be generated with a 1 day duration. So the creation date will be both the start date and, in that case, 1 day original or 8 hours original estimate, or start date and end date will have the same date, same estimate, which would be the creation date. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and make sure to check out other available tutorials on our YouTube channel.